What did a friend confess that made you cut them off instantly? The silence between us had always been comforting. That strange, seamless silence two people share when their souls have long since stopped needing to speak in full sentences. We were those kinds of friends, the kind who moved like orbiting satellites around each other's gravitational pull. Ever since Mrs. Valen's 7th grade literature class, where she had passed me a folded note with nothing on it but a poorly drawn gallows and the word friend, beneath, we'd been entangled. Call it trauma bonding. Call it fate. Call it two lonely girls latching onto the first person who didn't flinch at their darkness. Years passed. Boys came and went, and so did degrees, jobs, cities, and lovers. Through every crumbling relationship and whispered secret, she was always there. Lena. The one person who knew how I took my coffee black. One Clove who remembered the name of the cat I'd buried at 13. Who could finish my stories before I even reached the climax. She was chaos wrapped in Chanel perfume, with a voice like silk soaked in gin. I trusted her implicitly. So when my phone buzzed violently on the nightstand at 2:04 a.m., that piercing vibration that only came with bad news, I didn't even think twice. Half asleep, heart hammering, I didn't hesitate to pick up. She was already crying, slurring her words, her breath hissing in ragged gasps between sobs that sounded too rehearsed to be real. I assumed a breakup, maybe a fight with her mother, some trauma resurrected by the late hour and an excess of coffee. But her voice had a peculiar calmness threaded beneath the tears, like the still eye of a hurricane. Too still. I didn't understand the dread crawling up my spine until she began to speak clearly, every word like a needle pushing through skin. "I used to come into your place when you were gone," she said with a casual finality, like she was admitting to finishing the last of the milk. I blinked, sat up straighter, my pulse suddenly sinking to some inner warning alarm. "What do you mean?" "I mean I've been inside when you weren't there," she giggled softly, almost fondly. "A lot. For years now, really." The words hit with a sick, cold clarity, like icy water down my back. I looked around my apartment instinctively, the shadows seeming to elongate in quiet judgment. "How?" I asked, though part of me already knew. "You always keep the spare key under the second planter, not the first," she said, proud of her knowledge, as if recalling a cherished, shared memory. "You always thought you were so clever." I couldn't speak. My breath caught like glass in my throat. She continued, unbothered, her voice swaying between dreamy nostalgia and maniacal amusement. "I'd come in sometimes after you left for work, just to watch, see what you touched last. Sometimes I'd try on your clothes, leave them exactly how you left them. It wasn't even about the outfits. I liked how your scent clung to them, like I was absorbing your life through your skin." Every part of me tensed, nausea churning in my stomach like spoiled milk. But she kept talking, her words getting faster, lighter, as though she'd been holding this secret in for so long and now it bubbled over like champagne. "I even slept in your bed once. Okay, a few times. Your sheets smelled like lavender and that guy you were seeing last winter. I wanted to know what it felt like to be you, to just sink into your life and wear it like silk. You know what I mean, right?" No, I didn't, not even remotely. My voice had abandoned me entirely, cowering somewhere deep inside, refusing to react to the slow horror she unfolded like a macabre bedtime story. She chuckled again. And then came the sentence that shattered whatever leftover loyalty I might have had lodged in my bones. "I just wanted to know what it felt like to be you. And honestly," she paused, relishing the moment like a gourmet savoring their final bite, "I think I wore it better." There was no scream, no dramatic confrontation. My body simply moved, an automation driven by instinct and a dawning, choking fear. I ended the call, blocked her number. My hands trembled as I slipped out of bed and into clothes without even registering them. I didn't stop to breathe until the locks were changed. Deadbolt, chain, digital passcode, every possible barrier I could install between myself and the violation that had gone unnoticed for so long. At the police station, I could barely explain myself, the words faltering under the weight of how insane it all sounded. And yet, as I recounted the call, the officer's face didn't twist in disbelief. That made it worse. How common it must be for someone to slip so seamlessly behind the curtain of your life. I stared at the pale gray walls of the interrogation room, cold metal chair beneath me, thinking about the hundreds of moments I'd texted her from my couch, never realizing she'd been there just days before, watching, studying, becoming. There was no catharsis, no climactic confrontation with screaming and slammed doors. Just a quiet, irreversible sundering. I lost my best friend that night, but what I grieved wasn't the betrayal. It was the realization that I never truly knew her at all. She hadn't wanted my friendship. She'd wanted my life, and she nearly wore it better. The next few days blurred together like oil smearing across water, thin, iridescent layers of anxiety and sleeplessness coating everything I touched. The apartment no longer felt like mine. Every creak of the floorboards, every sigh from the old radiator, each groan of shifting pipes became her voice, her breath, her slow grin curling in the dark. It didn't matter how many times I checked the locks or left every light on. There was something fundamentally invasive in the memory of her presence, something that seeped deep into the bones of the place like mold in the drywall. I had the locks changed again, this time by a private contractor I found through a friend of a friend. No smiling receptionist, no records of my request in a database. I watched the man work from start to finish, arms crossed, heart thudding against my ribs like a trapped bird. He made polite small talk, unaware that my eyes kept flicking to the windows, the hallway, every possible point of entry. Lena had turned my sanctuary into a glass cage. And even though she was gone, blocked, reported, removed, I couldn't stop seeing her silhouette in reflections, as if her obsession hadn't just lived inside my apartment, but inside me. On the third night, I couldn't sleep. I lay motionless in bed, breathing as quietly as possible, half expecting to hear her breathing back. Shadows swam across the ceiling fan, fractured by the streetlight outside. I kept the baseball bat by my bedside and the pepper spray under my pillow. Every thud from the unit upstairs made me flinch. I was unraveling and I knew it. But knowledge wasn't the antidote. It was just more salt rubbed into the wound of reality. The police hadn't done anything substantial. They'd filed the report, nodded sympathetically, and gave me a brochure on stalking and home safety tips. No evidence of forced entry, they'd said. No current threat. Their language was sterile, procedural, utterly useless. Lena hadn't broken any doors. She hadn't needed to. She'd been invited, through years of trust, through secrets I gave her like offerings on an altar. She hadn't just crossed boundaries, she'd marinated in them. I found myself going back through old photos, scrolling until my thumb hurt. There we were, at the beach with matching sunglasses, grinning in the reflection of some overpriced boutique mirror, laughing in birthday videos, arms wrapped around each other like vines with no direction but closer. I studied every frame now like a detective searching for clues I'd missed. Were her eyes always so fixed on me, even when we were posing? Had her smile always been just a little too wide, a little too tight at the corners? I found a video I'd forgotten she took. We were at my place, maybe a year ago, drunk off cheap champagne. I was dancing in the living room, swaying in a big sweater and mismatched socks, twirling to some song I'd long since deleted from my playlist. The video was shot from a low angle. Lena must have had her phone propped on the counter. But what struck me wasn't me. It was her voice behind the camera, low, whispering. "Look at you. Perfect little puppet, always dancing. You don't even know who's watching, do you?" My blood ran cold. I replayed the video 3 times, volume turned up, trying to convince myself it was something else, an offhand joke, a drunken murmur. But no, the words were too deliberate, meant to be heard, meant to exist in that quiet little way only true confessions do. Suddenly, I was certain she had more footage, more recordings, more stolen pieces of my life stored somewhere, kept like trophies, a secret archive of my existence from the angle of a woman who wanted to be me. By the 5th day, I started noticing things missing, not anything valuable, nothing a thief would take. No, it was intimate, surgical. A coffee mug I loved, the chipped one with the obscene quote on it. A lipstick shade I wore when I needed confidence, now gone from my makeup drawer. One of my sleep shirts, the oversized one I never wore out of the house. Little things, the kinds of things that only matter to you. The kinds of things that make you feel like you're being disassembled piece by piece. And then came the card. I found it in my mailbox. No stamp, no return address. Just my name, scribbled in handwriting I'd recognize even if my vision was blurred by tears. Inside, a single sheet of paper. You always left your life lying around. I just picked it up. No signature, no threats. Just that. But it was worse than any explicit menace. It was confirmation. She hadn't stopped. She was still out there, still watching, still thinking of herself as the rightful inheritor of me. The locks didn't matter. The police didn't matter. She wasn't trying to break in anymore. She already had what she wanted. I felt the walls tightening around me. The apartment, once a place of comfort and solitude, now seemed too small, too loud, too known. Every surface had been touched by her. Every room had held her shadow. She had worn my life like a second skin, and now I couldn't peel it off. I called a friend in another state, someone Lena had never met, someone far outside our orbit, and asked if I could crash with them. No details, no explanations. Just the plea of a woman suffocating under the weight of being watched by someone who once shared her secrets. As I packed a duffel, I caught sight of myself in the mirror. I looked hollow, like someone had reached inside and scooped me out, left the shell intact, but scraped the insides clean. For a moment, I imagined her watching me again. Imagined her tilting her head and mimicking my movements in some other room, wearing my sweater, whispering to her reflection in my voice. At this point, it wasn't paranoia anymore. It was a Wednesday when I finally understood that running would never be enough. I'd been holed up in my friend Mara's guest room for over a week, curled into myself like a creature learning how to breathe again. The air smelled like lavender and fresh paint, safe, new, untouched. But no amount of clean linens or neutral walls could wipe away the sense of infection that had taken root in me. I didn't jump at every noise anymore. I didn't wake up sweating at 4 a.m. thinking I saw her standing at the edge of the bed. But I thought about her, constantly, as if she had pressed herself into my neurons, as if her presence had rewritten the map of my mind. I kept seeing that phrase, "You always left your life lying around." I just picked it up. I wanted to scrub it from my memory, burn it, drown it, but I couldn't because it meant something. It wasn't a threat. It was a declaration, a manifesto. And I realized that she wasn't going to stop, not until she was done. And what done meant to someone like Lena. It didn't involve closure. It didn't involve forgiveness or distance. It involved consumption. So I made a decision. I wasn't going to hide anymore. Mara begged me not to go back, but I'd already made peace with what had to happen. I didn't tell her everything. I didn't tell her about the hours I spent researching restraining orders that never came, or the hours after that spent learning how easy it was to buy surveillance equipment. I just told her I needed to reclaim something. My name, my breath, myself. When I returned to the city, it was raining. Not the dramatic, cinematic kind, but the quiet, soaking sort that seeps into your bones and erodes your resolve. I carried a decoy duffel, empty save for a single change of clothes and a burner phone. The apartment building looked smaller now, hunched like a secret, weighed down by everything it had witnessed. As I climbed the stairs, I could already feel her watching. Inside, I moved slowly, deliberately. I set up the cameras, one facing the front door, another angled toward the window, a third tucked discreetly into the air vent in the bedroom. I wasn't expecting her to come charging in with a knife. That wasn't her style. Lena was performance. She was theater. She needed to be seen. So I gave her an audience. Then I waited. The first night passed in silence, save for the creak of old wood and the hum of the city beyond the glass. I stayed awake, eyes fixed on the live feeds from my phone, nerves coiled tight. But nothing happened. The second night, I fell asleep on the couch, waking in a jolt to the sound of a passing siren. Still nothing. By the third night, I was beginning to wonder if I'd miscalculated, if perhaps she had finally let go. Maybe the card had been the end, her final punctuation. But on the fourth night, she came back. It was just past 2 a.m. when I heard it, a faint click outside the door followed by the whisper of movement. My heart didn't pound. My breath didn't catch. I was calm in a way that felt unnatural, like I was watching someone else's life unfold from behind glass. The camera caught her perfectly. She wasn't dressed in black like a cartoon villain. No. She wore my clothes. A sweater I thought I'd lost months ago. Jeans with a tear at the knee I remembered making during a fall in sophomore year. Her hair was curled the way I used to do it. Her makeup mimicked mine exactly. She wasn't breaking in. She was arriving, like she belonged. She knelt before the second planter, just like always. She didn't even hesitate. The key wasn't there. She paused, tilted her head like a dog hearing a strange sound. Then she looked up at the camera. She smiled, a slow, deliberate thing, as if she'd been waiting to be seen. Then she stood and walked away. Not ran, walked with that signature Lena sway in her step, hips moving like she was on a runway built just for her. The next morning, I took the footage to the police. I had everything now. Audio from the phone call, the card in her handwriting, timestamps, footage, proof of unauthorized attempts to enter my home. This time, they acted. Restraining order granted. Temporary protection. A formal report opened. An investigator assigned. It didn't erase what she'd done, but it gave the chaos a name. I returned home that evening with new locks, again, and a new sense of ownership. My space, reclaimed. I rearranged the furniture, changed the color of the walls, burned every item of clothing I even suspected she had touched. I tossed out the bed sheets, the dishes, the towels. It wasn't about cleanliness. It was about purification. I left nothing of the before intact. 2 weeks later, I got another letter. But this time, I was ready. I didn't open it. I handed it straight to the investigator. They traced the fingerprints, matched the print to the prior report. Within a week, they found her apartment, found the wigs, the photos, the journal entries labeled by date and mood, whole paragraphs written in my voice, whole chapters of my life, plagiarized in first person. She had been building a version of me, one breath at a time. She was arrested, charged with stalking, attempted unlawful entry, and possession of illegal surveillance. It went to court. I sat there the entire time in the front row, silent. She never once looked at me. Even when they read her own words aloud, she stared straight ahead, blank as snow. They sentenced her to 2 years, psychiatric evaluation, mandated treatment. She didn't speak when they cuffed her, but as she walked past, she turned slightly. Just enough so only I could hear it. "You still wear it wrong." That was the last time I saw her. I moved 6 months later, new city, new name on the mailbox, new everything. I kept my world quiet, small, untraceable. I told no one where I was going, left no breadcrumbs, no social media, no posts, no keys under planters. And sometimes when I catch myself in the mirror, there's a flicker of doubt, just a shadow, quick and uninvited. But I remind myself, she didn't win. She borrowed my skin, but she never stole my soul, and I will never wear her again.